Yes, it is right. If this is additional expense occasioned by being in London necessarily on parliamentary duties. That, I think, is perfectly reasonable. Otherwise, there will be people, perhaps with large families, who would find themselves, that doesn't happen in my case, but with large families, who might find themselves very substantially financially embarrassed. But the test has got to be, is this directly related to your parliamentary responsibilities? And if I may say so, what we now need is a wholly independent system, independent upon salary, independent upon pension, independent upon expenses, what is legitimate, the amounts, the validation, all of that has now got to be taken away from the House of Commons and put out independently, because, as I think others have suggested, we have reached a tipping point at which, in order to restore confidence, we have to take very much more radical steps and measures than we've done in the past.
We'll come to that in a moment. We're dealing with the moment with the situation as it is. Steve Easterbrook, I mean, an MP could do well on McDonald's on 100 quid a week. What do you make of the behaviour? Do you think...
I think what's unfolded in front of us over the last couple of weeks, quite frankly, is nothing short of a national disgrace. And I think as a taxpayer, it makes me angry, but also as a businessman, I simply cannot believe that any organisation can have such sloppy controls over cash handling. But I think in amongst some of the murky detail, the piece that I continually struggle with more than any other is why it is taking so long to fix it. Because there are thousands of businesses up and down this country that have perfectly viable expense codes that protects the employer and protects the employee, is based on the premise, I would understand, certainly in our business, that no one should profit from expenses. And just on a few commonalities, in my view, it'd be so straightforward just to fix the issue right at the very core of where it's at. We need transparency. We need absolute clarity. There should be no wiggle room whatsoever in an expense code. And we also need clear structure around the disciplinary code for anyone who abuses it, and then it needs to be independently audited.
OK. The woman in pink there on the right. Sit down. You don't need to get up to speak. Sit down.
I'm just very angry, that's all, Mr Dimbleby. Mrs Beckett, are you going to pay back the £72,000 that you've taken after your mealy-mouthed answer trying to explain yourself? And Mr Campbell, how the hell do you get through £800 a month on food?
Not £800 a month.
Hold on, Margaret Beckett first, I think, and you can... Margaret Beckett.
No, I'm not, because... As I pointed out a moment ago, well, one of the difficulties with this issue is that I completely understand that people can't understand why MPs make the claims that they do. And there are two reasons for that. One of them is because it's not appreciated that MPs do have extra costs that people, even in comparable jobs, do not have. And the second reason is because no one is allowed to explain. Now, you called my explanation mealy-mouthed. It's quite simple and straightforward. If you live in a Grace and Favour residence, you have 3 sets of housing costs, one of which you pay out of your own salary like anybody else does. That's the position I was in, and that's why, no. If I'm found, when there's this independent inquiry, if there's some question about something that I've paid, then of course I will deal with it in the way anyone else would. But I don't think they will make that judgment.
OK. The man here in the second row, in the front, you, sir, in the white jacket, yes? And then I'll go up there to the woman in pink. Yes?
I think what we need is to understand how widespread this problem is. We've got over 600 MPs, and I think it matters to know how many of them, for example, will appear in the Telegraph, and how many of them, for instance, are filling in their claims and whatever, honestly, so we can get a judge of just how widespread it is, because over 600 MPs, I mean, just what are those figures? How many will not appear in the Telegraph, for example?
Ben Brogan?
It's a very good question. The problem we have is that we face a huge mass of information which we have spent weeks going through to understand. And this is a mass of information which the MPs themselves didn't want us to see and fought very hard to prevent us from seeing it.
Not all.
Yeah, but the House of Commons as a body voted to prevent us from seeing the full information. And the fact is that as a result, it has happened that the Daily Telegraph is the newspaper that has been able to see this information, and certainly our objective would be to find a way of making sure that people out there can see the truth about all of their MPs.
He wants to know whether it's going to stop at about 80 where it is at the moment, or there are 650 odd MPs, or is it going to be half of that, or what?
As a newspaper, we have a responsibility to investigate issues, and when we find evidence of wrongdoing, we have a duty to publish
Yeah, but you
it.
must have a clue. You've had this stuff for weeks now. You must have an idea.
Well, one of the things that's really extraordinary that people perhaps don't appreciate, that it's not a file which has a useful index that says great story here or great story there. It's more than 1 million documents that have to be looked at and pieced together and worked out, and it takes a lot of time. We've had 25 people working on this full time for several weeks. We're going as fast as we can, but the fact is there's only so much you can do. The House of Commons has been threatening to publish this and has given itself a long time to do it. Rest assured, this is information that we are looking at, and we're trying to find ways of putting it in the public domain.
But
it
the
would be
decision's
hugely
just
more
been
helpful
taken.
if the House of Commons did it itself, but it has
The
chosen not
decision
to.
has just been taken that the Prime Minister has reached an agreement with one of the committees in the House that there will be a thorough independent audit of all MPs' claims, done by an independent body, not just by MPs or the Fees Office themselves. And all of the material, most of the material would be published in July anyway, but there is going to be exactly what you're asking for, an examination, an independent examination of every MP's return. So you will get that.
But it will be, I think, well, let's just stick with this point. Yeah, hold on, I'll come to you, but the
National
point,
Audit Office.
what the Daily Telegraph is producing is not quite what the House of Commons will produce, am I right?
No.
I mean, you're analysing
They're
the way the
choosing.
money's moved in a way that it might be hidden from you in the way the House of Commons produces
First of all, we don't know enough about precisely what it is that the House of Commons now
It's not
proposes
the
to
House
do.
of Commons, it's the National Audit Office.
And we don't know whether that process is going to be
Okay.
transparent and whether
All
we're
right.
going to see all the results.
I'm going to the woman in pink up at the back there. A lot of people want to speak. I'll try and get as many of you in as I can. Yes, madam.
Mrs Beckett, you do us a disservice when you say that the public don't understand. Maybe the only way that you will understand will be the results at the ballot box.
The man in the yellow T-shirt on the edge there, you, sir.
Yeah, I just don't understand why you have to have expenses accounts for second homes. Why can't you stay in a local hotel and just the hotel bill is the expense?
Theresa May?
Well, some people do it like that. I mean, it is open to MPs to choose an arrangement.
Why can't you all do it like that?
To have a second... Well, it's a question, actually, A, it's about how MPs choose to do it, but B, actually, taxpayers need to think it can very well be the case that sometimes that might be more expensive than...
So
other
your view
arrangements
is
that
no
are put in
second
place.
homes, stay in a hotel or
Yeah.
stay in a B&B. Ming Campbell?
If I was starting again, that's exactly what I'd do. But you have to remember this, that you'd have to have a hotel somewhere in central London within, let's say, half an hour or 40 minutes of the House of Commons.
Build one.
Yes, I'm in favour of that.
Build one.
The great failure on the part of the House of Commons was to pick up the Greater London Council building, which lies just across the Thames, and to turn that into accommodation for MPs.
All right.
It's what they do in Australia
The man
and
in the-
Canberra. Make much more sense. You become
Man
an
in the white
MP,
shirt there.
you get an apartment. You cease to be an MP, you no longer have the apartment.
Man in the white shirt.